Hello and welcome to another episode of SaaS Showdown. Here we are to talk about all things software as a service. I am Colin McCarthy, and once again I am joined by
Rose Layton. Hey everybody.
Hi Rose, good to see you again. Here we are back in the virtual realms of podcasts and YouTube channels, talking about all things SaaS. And as we get to the end of season 3, we are going to talk about something that we've touched on before a little bit. This is incident. Excuse me.
I was just telling a story about how I choked on my own saliva while I was talking to my CFO, and here Colin is choking on his own spit on our podcast.
Yeah. It is very. There is a lot of pollen here in the northeast.
You know, Colin,
the trees are covered with it.
I think there are maybe some blog posts that say step 1 is stay calm.
Yes.
Don't choke on your own spit.
I will stay very calm, but we had you're gonna get me going. So previously, we had talked about how to deal with vendor outages. Today, we're going to talk about incidents that impact ourselves, because there are a lot of ransomware activity, hacker activity, compromised activity, whether it's
sometimes just admin mistakes,
compromised accounts, phishing links being clicked on. So let's discuss incident response. Yeah. So
economic sanctions.
How do
the list goes on?
Yes. Yeah. So we'll stick all of the things we could discuss in a tombola, give it a spin, and then pick out a topic. So how do we, as IT professionals, deal with these things? And you've already alluded to it. One of the guides that we looked at, so we Googled managing a ransomware attack, and there's an infinite scroll. There are no longer pages on Google search results. It's an infinite scroll, a lot of articles, and one of the guides from Microsoft that had the top 10 things to do after a ransomware attack. Number 1 was stay calm. And that probably is a good place to start.
Because if you freak people out, you will make mistakes.
Yes. And also there's, first of all, you need to stay calm, and you need to evaluate what has happened.
And evaluate the urgency of your response.
Yes, yeah.
What is it, and how bad is it?
Yeah. Because if it is a ransomware attack that's spreading malware through your system and encrypting machines, maybe prompt access to disconnect machines is the right thing to do. If you think that a bad actor is on your network, it might not be the right thing to start shutting things down, because that would clue them into the fact that they know you're on there. You've worked out that they are on your network, and then they might launch their payload before you can, get professional specialist help from a security company and work to isolate them. So stay calm.
Yeah.
Evaluate.
Yeah. Stay calm.
Assess the situation.
Yeah, assess the situation. What is it? How bad is it? I would say the third one is something you've already started talking to, Colin, which is how do we limit the harm, right? If this is sort of an ongoing problem, how do we limit the harm that it's currently causing? And let's start to talk about how to get back up and running. I don't do... some people want to jump to why is this happening, right? I don't ever jump to that right at the beginning, unless it's relevant to the solution.
If you need to stop it from continuing, yes, yeah. If it's spreading, you need to know potentially how it got in, what actually happened,
right? Or you just need to be familiar enough with your network to know where is it now, and how can we isolate that? Yeah.
So yeah, I guess and obviously what I'm thinking about this is the first thing you should do is stay calm, and then break out your disaster recovery business continuity handbook, which everybody has on their desk sitting next to them, which has been fully updated. It's been printed out. It's been fully updated for this year. And also you've done, annual dry runs with all of your team. So everybody knows what their responsibility are. Everybody is probably everybody out there is rolling their eyes thinking, well, we know that never happens, even though people say it does. And it is the best practice. So this is the opportunity to put some of that in place.
Some organizations have pretty complex things that happen when incidents go. Like I've seen ones that, if you're using PagerDuty or whatever, you create an incident on PagerDuty and it spins up a war room and pings everybody that should be involved for you.
Yep. That's a key thing. You've got to get everybody who needs to be involved together, physically, virtually,
however you want to do it, in a Slack hangout, in a Slack channel, in a text group chat. Like it doesn't matter how you do it. It does matter that however you do it is accessible to everyone, and depending on the incident, your normal channels may not be available. Yes,
yeah, I've heard from other colleagues where they thought that they'd been tipped off that there were bad actors on their network. And to resolve it, they were told not to use their corporate Teams or Office 365 email system because bad actors, they didn't know what they were monitoring. So they had to quickly spin up, a WhatsApp group chat and then they had to get everybody's phone number and they're not normally accessible. So it's good to have that set up beforehand. I have done that with my
if you're not
IT
collecting
colleagues.
An emergency contact phone number for all of your colleagues, do it. You don't know when you're going to need that information, but you will need it someday. And it's really helpful that if one of your major communications channels is down, that you have alternate ways to reach people. I know I've worked in a couple of different companies now that they don't have work phones. That's not a thing that we have anymore. And, they're only issued to a limited number of people. And so but the only other alternative is to know what people's cell phone numbers are. Right.
Yeah. And actually,
and that's as an employee, that's a good reason to give your cell phone number is if something happens, they can reach you.
Yeah. And have an alternative means from the corporate way of contacting people, because I know that, work colleagues and friends ignore their corporate email system, whether it's Teams or Google Chat or Slack at the weekend. But you can, be sure that if you're going to be compromised and suffer an attack like this, it is going to be, the Friday night before a holiday weekend.
It is always a Friday afternoon, Colin.
Yes. Yeah.
It is almost always.
So you've got to get in touch with people over the weekend, out of hours.
Right. And in order to do that, sometimes we just have to default and fall back to these 1990s phone trees.
I was actually thinking of that. Yes, yeah. I don't think we need to go that far back and have a phone tree. And then I'm put in the comments below if anybody does know has used a phone tree back in the day.
I've seen one in the movies. They were. I've never actually used one.
I think schools have them for the PTO to get messages out before they had broadcast systems.
Well, they have automated texting systems too now.
Yeah. Yes, they do. So stay calm. Know that you've already got a plan of who's going to do what. You know how to get in touch with your key people.
Right. Get everybody into a room together or some kind of space together, and then start assessing what has happened, how bad it is, and how we're going to start to fix it. And some things have, I think, very predictable paths forward, right? So, for example, a ransomware attack has some pretty specific things that you should do.
Yes. Yeah.
And what are those things, Colin?
Let me just check my business continuity and disaster recovery handbook here. No, it would be ensuring that your backup is isolated, and it should be already. I know that some backup providers do have ransomware, anti-ransomware protection components in them, where you can, isolate them, or they'll detect they'll detect that your backup files are being encrypted, and put a stop to it. I would reach out to them. So you want to make sure that how you can recover is safe, because you will have to start rebuilding things. And then the difficulty that and there's Druva is a product that does backups, and they actually have a really good webinar on dealing with these sort of incidents. Because the problem you're going to have if you start shutting stuff down to try and protect yourself from the ransomware attack, you could do more catastrophic damage to the business. So it's not just a case of automatically shut everything down, because the business has still got to be operating, but it's isolating and knowing what you can restore. Active Directory, not that I am an expert in Active Directory, but if you have a distributed system with multiple domain controllers, if you start shutting them down and then they're not, they can cause problems with replication. If you bring them back up, things can be out of date. So you can cause more problems
by shutting them
in
down.
the long run. Yeah.
If you
restore something from a copy.
Yeah, this is also why it's important to make a plan for your specific conditions, because what my environment looks like, I'm going to have a very different plan of attack if ransomware comes for me than Colin's system, right? Like his environment. And so, and the size of your business and the composition of your business, like all of that stuff matters, and it's really unique to you. And so I think that's why it's important to even just like entertain these ideas, even if they seem like they're long shots. Like there have been some cases where like Colin, I would never expect in your industry that anything like this would ever happen. Right? Because like the type of work, the type of industry that it is, like marketing and advertising, just doesn't like, I'm like, why would they care? Right? But it does happen in your industry, and that it does happen. Yeah. Yes, it has happened historically. Like I think we hear about like the governments, the hospitals, the school systems, the utilities, like we hear a lot about things that are like critical infrastructure. And like, of course, ransomware is a target for those things. But like ransomware is also about making money ultimately. And so we just have to remember that like in that sense, no one is safe.
Yeah.
If there's even an opportunity to make money.
Yeah. And I think for the one industry that you mentioned there, not that it's really an industry, education, they are often attacked due to the underfunding that they might have, the large amount of devices they might have, the large amount of people who might click on things accidentally and launch something.
Right. So they're particularly susceptible to, I think, attacks that wouldn't necessarily get anyone else, or like get a more well-prepared organization, because they tend to be underprepared.
Yes, and that's often due to underfunding or lack of resources or not prioritization. Yeah,
we're not saying that they're negligent. We're just saying that like it's the reality of the situation.
Some larger corporations, do have potentially a more robust patch management system, might have more streamlined controls that can make them a little bit harder. But some larger businesses can be very very spread out with their IT systems, might be at a larger footprint to attack than,
right.
or
like you're in the process of consolidating or improving or whatever, and you're not done yet. Right. So there's holes that you don't want to be there and you're actively working to resolve, but like you're not finished.
Yeah. I'm sure for people who are listening, they either have or know people who still have Windows Server 2008 running, Windows Server 2012. I've heard of companies that are still trying to work to get off of Windows 2012. There are, people have RDP boxes, jump boxes sitting there to make life easier for them, or something else is broken, so they have to have, a remote session open on a machine. Somebody finds it and compromises it. It's you can lock all of the doors that you want, but if somebody leaves a crack in a window open, bad stuff can happen. Right. So
yeah. So the one you talked already about backups, like what other kinds of things can people do to help with disaster recovery? Because backups don't just help with ransomware; they also help with natural disasters.
Yep.
They also help with viruses, right? Ransomware is a type of virus, but that's not the only kind of virus.
Yep.
And there have been some fairly catastrophic viruses in the last several years. What else?
It is, as you said, natural disasters. If you can, if you are operating on site, which a lot of people still do, and I realize,
but like the natural disaster can help affect your data center too. So like,
I know. Let me just put in a little disclaimer. I know this is SaaS Showdown, and we're talking about a lot of physical things. But the majority of companies that are using SaaS-based tools, Office 365, Google Workspace, Slack, Nero, Miro, everything else, also have physical, a lot of physical stuff. They have laptops. They have Active Directory.
Yeah, they have data centers. They
have offices with Wi-Fi and networking equipment. So if you are in a utopia scenario where you're using Google as your IDP or Azure AD or Okta, everybody's working on Zero Trust in, a containerized browser, in a sandbox, and everything's only using the latest patch OS. And I've heard of
and that's the thing.
Some large companies that will only allow the latest patched OS to access their data, which does make them
that sort of environment
very secure.
I don't think that sort of environment is all that far off. Like, I think it will be a lot more common than it is today. Just like SaaS has really kind of like ballooned, right, in the last 7-8 years. I think that like this sort of zero trust thing we've been hearing about it for several years, Colin and I, because I think that's really sort of embedded in the nature of being like doing SaaS ops and like embracing SaaS. But in 5 years' time, we're going to see a lot more companies that are in those scenarios, right? In a utopia scenario. But for now, that's just not the case. So this is SaaS Showdown, and we are talking about some fairly physical stuff.
Stay calm, backups, communication. We talked a lot about in backups isolating your backups and making sure they're secure. It's also about cutting off or isolating your in and outbound connections to devices or your offices and your infrastructure, which is harder in this day and age with so many people still being remote, and potentially a lot of the stuff that you might have in the cloud and not in a data center.
I was going to say, what happens when somebody compromises one of your SaaS admin accounts?
That, wow. Then,
like I think my first thought is to shut off access to that account, right?
Yeah.
Because I can also do that as an admin. But then I wonder if they have used that admin access to give themselves access to other places.
Right.
Which they absolutely could have.
So you'd have to do a full inventory of all of the delegated permissions within that app. I pause then because that's a very scary thought.
But it happens. I mean, that's how Twitter was compromised. Yes. However long ago that was, right? Like somebody correctly impersonated an admin and got a password reset and compromised an admin account.
Yeah. This is why my biggest fear would be somebody would compromise an admin account, use that right to kick all of the other admins out, and then
this is horrifying.
And then they would be left, you know, to just casually walk around and do whatever they wanted to do.
So what do you do in that situation? You contact the vendor.
Yes, some of the vendors, I know Google Workspace have a process for gaining access to a tenant if you've lost access to the super admin account.
But this is also like why you should know your account rep. You should know, like, because when an emergency like this happens, you're not going to fill out a form and wait 7 business days.
I know. It's actually only 3. But it does require you to do a DNS entry, assuming you can still get into your DNS. Yes, yeah. So I think this really goes to delegated the principle of least privilege. Only your most trusted people should have super admin access or the highest level,
and when possible, so you should divide the responsibilities. Right? If someone compromises my admin account, okay, but as long as I don't have also have admin access to the DNS, right? Like we still have potentially ways to get around that.
Yeah. And also geographically, if you're a large company, don't have all of your admins in London when you've still got an office on the West Coast. Spread them around. Yeah. So
I think one of the things that I wanted to mention, because I was thinking about this a lot, like I have not worked at a place that uses any kind of backup software. I have mostly worked for small businesses, and it just doesn't make financial sense for them to have backup software.
You have missed the joy of taking a backup tape out of the machine on a Monday and walking it over to the other building. When those businesses had physical infrastructure, I've also had the pleasure of not having to work for very many businesses that have physical infrastructure. When those businesses had physical infrastructure, they did have backups. And then they had hard drives that needed to be replaced, however many often. And they had backups that ran at a regular cadence and like whatever. Since moving away from that kind of stuff, they have not employed any sort of cloud backup software, which is what you kind of use on a more decentralized SaaS system, right? Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, and this is, I guess, some wisdom that I learned from a previous manager and a mentor and like really kind of took to heart, which is that if you are not willing to afford systems that help you recover from disasters, like backup software and stuff like that, you must instead invest in systems that basically recover themselves. Mm-hmm. So the utopia nirvana of that is Chromebooks right now.
Talking about OS, yes.
Yeah. Well, no, not just OS, but like on Google using Chromebooks, like the network has nothing on it. Basically, you know, it might have some printers and that's it. And then like if the network gets compromised, okay, just don't use it. Send everybody home to use their own personal networks, right? If there's an issue with the Chromebooks, or there's an issue with an office, right? Like it's really easy to just sort of like pull devices from a consumer perspective and like ship them out to people, and then they log in and all their stuff is there, right? So like we're really relying on the economies of scale of Google to help deal with that. I don't know that there's a similar version of that with Microsoft. I think maybe you could get OneDrive to be that kind of place, but like a Chromebook remembers all your settings and all your apps and stuff too. So like there's really no comparison. Like literally signing into a brand new Chromebook, there's not much you have to do.
Yeah. So if you're working totally in a browser using Chrome OS, you could sleep comfortably at night thinking, I do not have to worry, I am secure.
Assuming that you're using two-factor, your device settings are appropriate.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, but like, yeah, I guess your time to recover is not going to be the same as an organization that has a bunch of physical stuff.
Yes, right? Yeah. And I'm trying to look on this machine here about OneDrive, because obviously OneDrive does create a folder on your computer.
You have to use the folder.
So you have to use the folder to put your files in to sync to the cloud. Mm-hmm. And then if your computer is compromised and has ransomware, it would encrypt that folder, potentially encrypt some of the files up in the cloud as well.
They've done some testing on that with Google Drive as well, Google Drive for desktop. And I will say that traditional file types are more susceptible than Google Doc file types.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, that's the thing. It's like, you really do have to do your research, but I think, you know, when you're considering, because we can all put our heads in the sand and pretend this is never going to happen to us. We can. And then you'll be in a really bad...
Are you giving me permission to do that?
I'm just saying, like, it's possible. Like, do you have to be prepared for a disaster? Do you have to be prepared for ransomware? No. You don't. Do you want to keep your job? If something like that happens, do you want to keep your job? The answer to that question could also be no. Like, this is a really free world that we live in. There's this thing called quiet quitting. Yeah. I'm using Gen Z terms on you now, Colin. I'm sorry.
It is. Yeah, I have heard of that. So yes.
But like, that's the thing. So we could pretend these things are never going to happen to us. Absolutely. Right. And just kind of go on about our business with our other priorities and like not prepare for any like massive thing to happen. However, we have seen that massive things do happen. So like, I don't know if y'all knew, there was a pandemic like not that long ago, and that like really changed a lot of the way we work. Mm-hmm. And guess what? The people who were most prepared to deal with the pandemic were people who were already sort of working in that direction well before it happened. And so like organizations that were prepared to go remote and weren't so reliant on their office networks were a lot more prepared for the logistics of sending everyone home.
Yeah. I remember February of 2020 when we sat down with the leadership of, where I was working, and it's like, all right, what's our business continuity plan? Continue to use Google Workspace.
From an IT perspective, I think for you and me, it was very simple. It's like, let's continue doing what we're doing. We're going to have some logistical challenges to deal with, like the physical hardware, but like other than that, it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah. Everybody has access to all the tools they need in a browser. So we'll be fine. And it was relatively easy. But yeah, these on the topic of incident response, whether it's ransomware or some other type of event, the likelihood of them happening, considering the number of companies and the number of attacks out there, if you're a relatively small organization, probably relatively low. Could it happen? Yes, of course. If you're a large organization, probably are on a list, a target of an attack. Can you put some easy things in place to mitigate a lot of the heartache and headache and financial, catastrophe to organizations? Yes.
I don't know if I'd call
patching
them
machines
easy, but not every, because not every,
they're not
the most strenuous things you could do.
They're not. There's some best practices that you can do.
Yeah, like auto updates,
and you
patching. That's definitely one of them, because like then you're relying on your various vendors and your OS manufacturer to handle it for you, right? And it doesn't mean that it won't happen, but it just means that it's a lot less likely.
Yeah, and there's a lot of resources out there. We'll put some in the show notes. Most government organizations have a cybersecurity information site which give you information. All of the big security vendors have, white papers about how they think these compromises and attacks could be covered. It is worthwhile, spending an hour, half a day, depending on what you can afford time-wise with your team, working through, hypothetically talking about, what we'd do if,
even if you
get them
only
thinking about
spend
it. Don't
like an hour or two a month talking about those scenarios, that's still plenty to get people thinking and can help the organization prioritize projects and prioritize improvements that are going to work towards those goals. Right. It doesn't always have to be we have it. It's not like during the pandemic when I think teams of people were meeting multiple times a week to figure out what was going on and follow all of the changing guidance and things that basically changed hour to hour, minute to minute. But it doesn't have to be anything like that. Disaster preparedness and business recovery can really be just normal conversations that you have once or twice a month where you entertain some possible idea, right? No matter how rare it is.
Yeah.
And as long as you have a decent group of people in the room, that's enough.
Yeah. It's, it's being aware and being cautious. Everybody who owns a house knows where their fuse box is and knows where their, mains water line is. They can turn it off. Do they expect there to be an electrical problem? No. Do they expect there to be a water problem? No. But if there is, they know where those things are to turn them off. You just need to, have a tabletop game, talk it through. As a lot of the guides stay calm. Have a backup, isolate your machines, identify where the compromise is, figure out
where your weak points are. And I think talking through the ideas is some of the most valuable stuff I've ever done. Because I honestly, when I first really started doing this work, I had never really thought about the impact of a natural disaster, or not even a natural disaster. Actually, the first time I ever had to deal with that was there was a bombing that closed one of my offices because it was on the same street. Yes, and so,
that's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. No one was hurt as far as I know, but it was one of those things where we were what would have happened if this had like really affected us, or like been our building instead of the one that was like 6 buildings down, right? And just entertaining that idea and that scenario, which I had never really considered, right? Was just a very useful exercise. And, sometimes you can validate yourself and the work you've been doing by having these exercises. So I think like, when the pandemic happened and we had to send everybody home, we had been sort of working towards this eventuality, and we were thinking, like we are remote ready. And that was the ultimate test. Are we remote ready? And it turned out that yes, we were. Right. So it was really validating to know that like all of the work that we had been doing up to that point prepared us for that moment. And yeah, like when leadership came down to be like, what's going to be the impact of this thing? We were like, oh, no impact on our side.
Yeah. It's but as you say, it does pay to be ready and talk it through and have an idea. So probably time to update our business continuity and
drag that booklet
disaster
off the
recovery
corner of your
plans.
desk.
Yeah, it's around here somewhere. And update all of the WhatsApp, break glass WhatsApp or Slack channels. Give them
make sure your employees
a test
are
message,
updating their phone
just to make sure they're working. Yeah. So, but I do hope that nobody succumbs to any type of incident where they need to think about these things. But I hope they are being prepared as best they can.
One tip I want to share with the listeners, Colin, is don't ask ChatGPT to write your business continuity plan for you.
Because
in researching this episode, Colin and I thought to ask a generative AI if it could tell us what to do in the case of a ransomware attack, or if it could tell us some things about disaster preparedness. And it wasn't that it gave us bad information. It did give us actually incorrect information. Like it said, in order to recover from a ransomware attack, you should back up your encrypted files, which I don't know if you know, but by that point, it is too late.
Yes, I remember. Yes, yeah, that step was wrong. The step should have been, before you succumb to an attack, make sure you have a backup of your files.
Yes. So I know that content generation and generative AI is like all the rage right now, and Colin and I will talk about that next time. I just wanted to let you know that on this particular topic, ChatGPT, you need to review it before you publish.
Yes, yeah.
It is not accurate.
Yeah.
So. All right. That's all for this time, folks.
Excellent. Cheerio, Rose.
Produced by the Tab Geeks Network. Enjoy all of our shows on YouTube at youtube.com/tabgeeks. Join our exclusive, free, no sponsors allowed Slack community and sign up for our newsletter at tabgeeks.com.